We've been talking so much, at least the president's been talking about economic fairness as the principal goal of the tax code. And frankly, the most fair thing we could do in the tax code and the most fair thing we could do in the Senate would be working to be sure that we're dealing with the important issues that job creators and families are dealing with across the country today. All of us have had the opportunity to be home for a couple of weeks, for the last 2 weeks. I was able to be in the last of the 115 Missouri counties I hadn't been in since I was sworn into the Senate 15 or so months ago. And I learn a lot when I'm out there, and what I learned this time is that people are really focused on fuel cost. Fuel costs are on track to hit an average of $4 a gallon by summertime. This is more than double what fuel costs were in January of 2009, and it set the all-time record for the last 2 months. I talked to the to people in South Central Missouri who are trying to provide transportation for older Americans and disabled Americans, and the fuel cost increase of $150,000 means that they have to cut back their services. The Chamber of Commerce survey this week found that nearly 1 out of 4 small businesses reported that their top concern was gas prices. And when you think about that, whether it's delivery or whether it's their employees getting to work or whether it's people deciding that they can't go to that small business, that restaurant, that bowling alley, that movie theater, or whatever it might be, because they just put too much money in the gas tank of their car, we should be concerned. Unfortunately, instead of working to pass solutions that would jumpstart our economy and restore consumer confidence, we seem to want to talk about the wrong things over and over again. We had a vote this week on the so-called Buffett tax, a tax that almost everybody that talked about this discussion said, well, it's more of a gimmick than a solution, because even if you collected this new tax on Warren Buffett and his wealthy friends, it would, in a year, you'd collect what the federal government deficit is in a day. We're not going to solve this problem dealing with 1/365th of the deficit like it's the solution to the problem. The lead sponsor of the Buffett tax in the Senate, Senator Whitehouse, said on the Senate floor that the aim of the bill is not to lower the unemployment rate or the price of gasoline. Now, why wouldn't we have a bill on the floor that the aim of it was to either do something about energy prices or job creation? This bill would have generated less than 1% of the $7 trillion deficit projected in the 2013 budget during that same period of time. It'd take 250 years to collect enough money under the so-called Buffett rule to pay the 2011 deficit. If the solution to last year's deficit would take us 250 years of recovery, the truth is we're just wasting a lot of time here on little things rather than big things. And you can make little things sound like big things. You can make it sound like that the fairness is the critical element of everything the government should do, as opposed to opportunity being the critical element of everything the government should do. You can make it sound like that people will still invest money, their IRA or their lifetime savings, if the return is, even if you're successful, is zero, but that's not what's going to happen. Mr. President, I just finished reading a book about President Eisenhower and General Eisenhower, and there are many pertinent things today in that book, but one was when the General Eisenhower and others came back from World War II, the top tax rate was 90%. In fact, the top tax rate from about 1934, 33, 34 until 1981 was always at least 70%. But 2 points to be made there. One, nobody paid it if they could figure out how to avoid it, and almost everybody figured out how to avoid it. Lots of passive investment instead of active investment. It had to be a really good time for municipal bonds because there was no tax on municipal bonds, so why not put your money there rather than put your money at a place where if you made any money, 70% of it would go just to the federal government, or in 1946, 90% would go to the federal government. But in the capital gains rate, which happened to be the rate that World War II memoirs were taxed at, which is why it was in this book, was 25%. Even when the top rate in the country was 90%, nobody thought that the capital gains rate should be even a third of that, because they knew that people wouldn't invest money if there's no return. We need tax policies that multiply the opportunities created in our economy rather than subtract from those opportunities. If we want this not to be about politics but about math, it needs to be about multiplication, not subtraction. It needs to be about how do you drive an economy to create more to encourage more private sector jobs? How do you encourage investment? How do you encourage people taking risk? Because if nobody takes a risk, somebody else doesn't get an opportunity. People being willing to take a risk means that an opportunity is created for somebody else that wouldn't have been created otherwise. So last month, we were here talking about tax hikes on American energy producers that clearly would be passed along to consumers. Nobody even argues that if you had passed those tax hikes last month, that gas prices wouldn't go up. Now, why in the world would we be arguing about anything that would raise gas prices rather than lower gas prices? The sponsor of that bill said, nobody has made the claim that this bill is about reducing gas prices. The majority leader, Mr. Reid, admitted it's not a question of gas prices. Senator Schumer said, this was never intended to talk about lowering gas prices. Senator Begich said the bill, quote, won't decrease prices at the pump for our families and small businesses, and these were the supporters of the bill. Now, why would we have a bill on the floor to do that when we could support what the president says he's for, which is an all-of-the-above energy strategy? Let's do what we can to solve this problem. The most glaring recent example is, of course, the Keystone Pipeline. Would run right through my good friends from North Dakota, come through their state, go through Nebraska, go through other states, get to our refineries. It would create 20,000 jobs. It would decrease our country's dependence on people that don't like us very well, and it would encourage more North American energy. It would encourage energy from our best trading partner, Canada. It's just one of the common sense steps that we can make. If you'd have told me a couple of years ago that when you're home in the spring of 2011, that one of the things that people will be talking to you about is why aren't we building an oil pipeline from Canada? I'd said, well, that's pretty detailed understanding of our energy problems, but it's an understanding that's out there. If we're going to create real economic fairness, we need to work together to pass solutions that will bring down prices at the pump and get Americans back to work. That's why I believe, Mr. President, we need to utilize all forms of American energy, including wind and solar, renewable, biomass, shale gas, shale oil, coal, nuclear alternatives. I'm ready to work with my colleagues across the aisle and anywhere else to do what we can to help American families. I hope that we can do this together. The shortest path to more American jobs is more American energy. The best and the most fair thing we could do is what's good for American families and small businesses and job opportunities. I hope we can get to work on that, and Mr. President, I would yield the floor.